It is now my pleasure to introduce Catherine Grant, who is responsible for the management of the Crime Survey for England and Wales at the Office for National Statistics. So she has been overseeing the return to face-to-face fieldwork post-COVID, and then the introduction of Wave 2 telephone interviews and other important things with regard to the survey. So without further ado, I will just hand over the floor to Catherine. Thank you. So Catherine, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So just to introduce myself again, I am Catherine Grant and I'm the head of core delivery and statistics for the Crime Survey for England and Wales in ONS. I wanted to focus today on a bit of an update on the reports that we've put out over the last year or so. I'm not going to look at the headline results from the survey. I assume probably you're quite familiar with those. They're available on the website as well, so just as a little plug there, do visit. Instead, I wanted to think about the survey method, the direction that we're looking at, some developments to the survey as well. And then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Joe, and he's going to talk a little bit more about transformation work on the survey. Before I start, I wanted to just have some acknowledgements. So firstly, the Crime Survey for England and Wales is still using a face-to-face data collection approach, and that fieldwork is contracted out to Varian, who run all the fieldwork for us. I've got there's some colleagues here from Varian doing an excellent job managing the fieldwork and all the interviewers that are out collecting all the data for us. Also, I'm presenting the work today from two colleagues in the audience, so Billy and Ulla, who've done the data quality reports and also looked at divergence analysis. I always forget acknowledgements, so I thought I should do them first. So, we heard some of this morning in Susan's speech, but I wanted to pick up on a little bit of the background to the crime survey. So it's got a huge, long history of measuring the extent of crime in England and Wales, dating back to 1981. It measures crime against adults aged 16 plus living in private households. So we heard earlier this morning that there are some limitations around that. There are elements of the population that it doesn't cover. For the crimes it covers, and among the populations it includes, it gives an excellent measure of trends in crime. And it was really great to hear this morning of how useful that is and exactly what it covers. We also additionally do interviews with children aged 10 to 15 within the same household. That will run until the end of March, and we're going to replace that data collection with an online survey that's currently under development. So the picture behind me, the graph, is our sort of headline graph of crime, and you'll see we introduced fraud there, which is the lighter blue line just above. And that's the measures that everyone talks about on the crime survey, that total number that's published up front, the incidence of crime. And that's crucial. That's one of the key reasons for doing the survey. But as we heard this morning, also the nature of crime is so important. The detail that we get from those reports, that people tell us how crime actually happened, that you can't get from any other source. But above all of that as well, we cover experiences of domestic abuse that aren't included in this picture here, fear of crime, experience and perceptions of antisocial behaviour, crime prevention and security measures, attitudes towards the police, attitudes towards the criminal justice system, alcohol and drug misuse, and experience of domestic abuse, sexual assault, and abuse during childhood. So a huge breadth of information that's covered that can all be linked together and looking at victimisation and sort of linked victimisation across the survey. And that long time trend is really important, and I think has been really is a really crucial part of the survey. So I just wanted to cover a few of the major changes to the survey. So you can see here, this is the peak that we heard about earlier, crime and then crime fell from 1995 onwards. I started working, just to prove Susan's point from earlier, back in 2004, so back now at the beginning of this timeline. I started working on the crime survey at actually Varian there before I moved to ONS. And over the years, we've made some changes to the survey, but the two most significant changes recently are the introduction of the fraud and computer misuse measures. And you can see that that's then increased and capturing a lot more crime from those types of measures, but also the pause in fieldwork, the suspension of fieldwork over the pandemic. Now that's had a huge impact on all face-to-face surveys, and I'm going to come on to talk a little bit about that now and the ongoing impact it has on data and data quality. So in 2022, ONS asked for the accredited official statistics designation for the crime survey to be suspended because of concerns over the data quality of the survey following the return to interviewing after the pandemic. So we returned to face-to-face interviewing in October 2021. We had a pause between March 2020 and October 2021. When we returned to face-to-face interviewing, it was much harder. People were clearly reluctant, for obvious reasons, to let people in their houses, and we saw a big drop in response rates. So when we first published the data, we had concerns about lower sample sizes because we had a 9-month data collection period for that first publication, and truly understanding the impact of that lower response rate and sample sizes on data quality. So in June 2024, we published a data quality review to assess the CSEW compliance with quality requirements of the Code of Practice for Statistics. And we looked at that across 3 main areas. So the sample size, the response rate, and representativeness of the sample. I'm pleased to say that actually our accredited official statistics designation was reinstated earlier this year for data from the year ending March 2023 onwards. So I just wanted to look a little bit more at that data quality review. So the overall sample size for the survey has reduced to 31,000 interviews per year, down from about 35,000 pre-pandemic. In its heyday, I think we were up to 46,000 at one time, but it's not been 46,000 for quite some time. So we looked at the reduced sample size and compared how the scale of differences that could be measured in the survey from the 2019-20 survey to the 2022-23 survey. And actually what we found was very limited impact on the scale of the level of uncertainty for those headline estimates of crime in the survey. We also looked at response rates. So these are the response rates for the survey. This used to be my favourite chart. It's less so anymore since the pandemic. So we were holding pretty steady with a sort of mid-70s response rate. It had seen some signs of decrease just before the pandemic. Then with the pause in fieldwork, coming back into field and sort of restarting the survey, that response rate then was around the sort of the mid-40s, and that's where we seem to have evened out. We are seeing some signs of increase. The 46% is the provisional response rate, and we're sort of pushing ahead, hoping to move back up towards the 50s, the early 50s. We're not going to get to the mid-70s again in terms of response rate. If you look at, there's increasing evidence that actually the headline figure of response rate isn't necessarily the best measure to understand bias in social surveys. It doesn't necessarily, you don't see an increase in non-response bias just because of the lower response rate. One of the key measures to look at is actually the representativeness of the people that you do include. And so that was part of what we looked at as part of that data quality review, and we compared the sample that we had pre-pandemic and post-pandemic respondent characteristics compared with Census 2021 estimates. And what we actually found was both samples had a good representativeness compared to the 2021 census, and actually it was looked slightly better for the post-pandemic, the 22-23 survey data. So based on all of that, we were quite confident in asking for the official accredited statistics designation to be reinstated, and that was done. So one of the other areas that we've looked at as well this year, so we published in July, was divergence on the data that we collect for the crime survey. So over the last 10 years, the trends in crime from Crime Survey and police recorded crime have appeared to diverge. So this is for a comparable subset of crime, and it's worth bearing that in mind. Obviously, police recorded crime captures a different type of crime from crime survey for England and Wales. There's difference in the population, so when we're looking at this comparable subset, we're not including anyone who doesn't live in the private household. In England and Wales, we're not including children in that, all of which is captured in police recorded crime figures. What we've seen is both statistics had shown a reduction in crime from 2003 to 2013. And we saw that improvements to police recording practices had the largest impact probably on trends in violent crime. So we'd seen that had then a lot more violent crime was being recorded by the police. In more recent years, the PRC data have seen a flatter trend. So when you adjust for a lot of the differences in the profile of the crime survey in terms of its coverage, in terms of the comparable subset, what's reported to the police, it tends to be really the big difference is still left within violent crime, violence with and without injury. And then we know that there are differences there in terms of some levels of known issues with the crime survey data. When you're looking at some of the trends, we don't record incidents of domestic abuse. So we capture that in a separate element of the survey. We don't have an incident number as such as a count. So that's not captured in here. So I just wanted to move on to a few of the survey developments that we're covering as well. So firstly, on domestic abuse. So we've known for some time that there are some issues with the domestic abuse measures and what we capture. One of the key strengths of the survey, as I've talked about, is the fact that we've been measuring crime in the same way since 1981. That's positive, but also has some downsides when you see change in crime. Now, actually, for a lot of crime, it's been happening for centuries. So if you look at violence, theft, housebreaking or burglary, that's been going on for centuries. And the beauty of the crime survey is we just capture what happened and not necessarily how it happened. Well, we capture how it happened, but we ask open questions of respondents so we can capture changing modes of crime. So in that way, it's been able to keep up with changes to crime in society. It's a little bit different with some of the measures of domestic abuse, which is obviously as well a long-standing crime, but there have been a lot of quite significant changes in the legal definitions around that, changes in the law that weren't necessarily reflected in the content of the survey. So we've done some work with the University of Bristol to review the existing domestic abuse questions to make sure they cover the current definition and also to make sure that they cover coercive and controlling behaviour and to bring that into the measures. So we've done a lot of testing work, cognitive testing, and we've been running a split sample experiment on the survey for the last 2 years. The evaluation of those new questions will be published in the next couple of months with a recommendation on the way forward. And similarly, we're also redeveloping the crime survey questions on sexual victimisation. So again, following engagement with users in 2023, we've identified a few gaps with the current CCW sexual victimisation module. And so we are now currently developing a new set of questions, and we've just done some cognitive interviewing with victims, with survivors, with focus groups, and with the general public as well. To look at how those questions are working. So we're looking at analysing those findings, making some amendments to the questions, and then we'll have a further round of testing before we launch those questions. And those are planned to be added to the survey from October. So a whistle-stop tour of all things crime survey related.
Thank you. I think we can thank Catherine for this really interesting presentation.